Welcome back to Outside Views. This isn't just a political commentary or POV, it's a warning from the world stage about the fundamental principles of economic prosperity. And the title of this video, Brexit offers the world a warning about trade barriers, is not a hyperbole. It's a profound truth that we are now seeing validated by the most sober voices in global finance. As you already know, I talked about it this week. Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, said it very clearly to a gathering of the world's central bankers in Washington. He stated that the impact of Brexit on British economic growth is negative for the foreseeable future, and he specifically presented it as a cautionary tale to the wider world. And think about that phrase, foreseeable future. It means this isn't a temporary dip or a solvable hiccup. It's a permanent economic scar caused by the deliberate choice to erect barriers. And everyone was told that leaving the European Union was about sovereignty and global Britain, a grand vision of a nimble, deregulated trading nation. But the reality is that the new post-Brexit environment has become a masterclass in how self-inflicted economic wounds are the most painful and the hardest to heal. The core of the problem, the lesson the world must learn, is not about tariffs. The UK and EU have managed to keep trade mostly tariff-free on goods, which sounds like a win. But tariffs, frankly, are a relic of the past or just a toy for Donald Trump, and they are only a tiny fraction of the cost of international trade. The real killer is regulatory friction, also known as non-tariff barriers, and this is the insidious poison that is slowly strangling UK-EU trade and, by extension, warning every protectionist politician on the planet. When you force businesses to deal with customs checks, rules of origin requirements, and regulatory divergence, you have effectively built an invisible paper-based wall. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the UK's own fiscal watchdog, estimates that this entire enterprise will reduce the country's long-term productivity level by a devastating 4%. 4%. That is not a marginal number, it's an economic earthquake. It means every single person in the country is permanently less productive, permanently poorer than they would have been had they simply maintained the frictionless status quo. And this cost is being borne most heavily by the most vulnerable part of the economy. That's small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs. For a giant multinational hiring a dozen compliance lawyers to navigate two separate regulatory systems, one for the UK, one for the EU, it's just another cost of doing business. For a small bakery, a boutique manufacturer, or a family-run export firm, those rules are an impossible burden of red tape and complex documentation. And the evidence is stark. Surveys of business trading with the EU confirm that a massive percentage are reporting significant extra costs and difficulties just in adapting to the new reality. The sheer complexity of something as simple as proving the origin of a product, the rules of origin, is enough to make many SMEs simply give up on exporting to their nearest and largest market. And what we are seeing is a decline not just in the volume of trade, but in the variety of goods being traded, which signals that countless small firms are deciding it's no longer worth the hassle. And that loss of firm-level engagement and variety is a genuine tragedy, because those small exporters are the ones who drive innovation and domestic competition. When they pull back, the entire economy gets less competitive and less dynamic. This whole political project was sold on the promise of deregulation, of escaping overzealous EU rules to allow British businesses to fly. But the reality has been the opposite. Dual regulation. Firms that trade with the EU, which is the vast majority of all UK exporters, now have to comply with two different rule books instead of one, which is exponentially more complicated and costly. And this problem is only exacerbated by what analysts call passive divergence. The EU keeps updating its rules, and every time it does, the UK automatically moves further away, creating new trade barriers by default without any new political decision being made in London. It's a perpetual self-widening chasm of complexity. And what about the great trade boom with the rest of the world, the global Britain vision? Well, the data from the Office for National Statistics and the OBR tells a very sober story. UK goods exports to the EU have struggled, but the promised compensating rise in exports to non-EU countries has simply failed to materialize. The UK has demonstrably missed out on the global trade rebound that other advanced G7 economies have enjoyed since the pandemic. Yes, services trade has done somewhat better, but that is largely because services are inherently less exposed to border checks, and the UK has a comparative advantage in digital and professional services that can be delivered remotely. Even here, though the lack of mutual recognition of professional qualifications and restrictions on the movement of personnel, the barriers for lawyers, architects and consultants to simply cross the border, are costing the UK dearly. The British Chambers of Commerce has noted that services exports in affected sectors have declined because firms are losing clients who demand easier access. And the overall picture is this. The UK's trade intensity has fallen behind its peers, and its investment growth has been significantly weaker than expected before the 2016 referendum. Uncertainty itself acts as a trade barrier, chilling foreign direct investment and discouraging long-term capital expenditure. Why would a major manufacturer choose the UK as a base for export into Europe when the logistics are so demonstrably easier just across the channel? They won't. They are choosing to move. And Bailey's warning is not unique to Britain. He said, the same argument holds for the world economy and tariffs. And this is the universal principle. Make an economy less open and it will restrict growth. And this is why the Brexit failure is a gift of negative wisdom to the world. It serves as a real-world, high-stakes experiment for every country being tempted by the lure of protectionism and economic nationalism. When world finance leaders meet, they aren't just talking about US tariffs. They are talking about a worrying global trend where countries are increasingly seeking to build walls rather than tear them down. Brexit is the ultimate proof that economic integration provides vastly greater benefits than any political notion of unfettered autonomy. The marginal theoretical gains from being able to set your own obscure rules are completely swallowed whole by the massive practical costs of having to check, document, and prove everything at the border. It's an exercise in futility, costing the country billions in lost opportunity and a permanent 4% reduction in potential prosperity. And what I find most egregious is the deliberate diversion of national energy and focus away from genuine critical issues. The entire political apparatus has been consumed for years in the tedious, costly work of simply managing the chaos of separation. Every hour spent negotiating the Northern Ireland Protocol or debating the latest piece of passive EU divergence is an hour not spent fixing the healthcare system, improving education, or investing in next-generation infrastructure. The opportunity cost alone is staggering. The decision was sold as a path to greater global influence, yet the resulting reduced economic competitiveness and internal division have arguably made the UK a weaker, less focused and less significant player on the world stage. Global influence is built on economic strength, stable trading relationships and reliable partnerships, all of which have been undermined by this project. We must look at the data, the declining export figures, the crippling regulatory friction, the OBR's permanent downgrade, and accept the fundamental lesson. The pursuit of a narrow, idealized political goal like sovereignty, when it conflicts with the basic mathematics of trade, inevitably leads to self-harm. The world needs less friction, more cooperation, and deeper integration to tackle shared problems like climate change, global health, and future supply chain resilience. Brexit is the polar opposite of this necessary global trend. It's a nostalgic, backward-looking fantasy that has resulted in a concrete, measurable reduction in national wealth and potential. So when you see a politician in any country advocating for barriers, tariffs, and economic isolation, Point them to the Bank of England's warning. Show them the UK's trade deficit, the small businesses driven out of foreign markets, and the 4% productivity penalty. The UK is now the world's most expensive economic lecture on the folly of protectionism. It is a stark, unavoidable lesson in how freedom from a political union can translate directly into a self-imposed prison of economic mediocrity. And everybody must learn this lesson, not just for Britain's sake, but for the sake of global growth and cooperation. The world cannot afford to ignore this clear and painful warning. And if you deliberately choose to make your economy less open, you will simply and undeniably make yourself poorer. Maybe purer, but also poorer. And that is the enduring, damning truth of trade barriers, and Brexit is the proof etched in the balance sheets. And if you want to see another Outside Views right now, the next one is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.